This is Hear Me Out. I'm your host, Celeste Headley. Massive cultural events are having a major comeback this summer. After years of pandemic restrictions, concerts and movie theaters are roaring back to profitability and importance. But what that means is that this summer, it's been hard to avoid stories of people behaving badly, throwing things at pop stars, taking smartphone videos of Barbie at the movie theater, starting squabbles with other attendees that sometimes turn violent. Some of this isn't new, of course, but we can all probably agree that things have gotten kind of bad. So the question becomes, what do we do now?
Does it come down to choosing an absolute freedom for all to behave however they like and this sort of police state? I have to say, I really think there's a middle ground.
Writer Sara Stewart joins us to say we can't force each other to behave better, so it's time for organizers to step up. Stay with us.
In moments of stress, it can feel like there's nowhere to turn. The good news is you're not alone, and there are resources to help support you. Health Break, a podcast by UPMC Health Plan, explores this topic with one of our employee assistance program managers who provides 3 tips for finding comfort and accessing support in moments of stress. Listen now to learn how you can start managing your stress at upmchp.us/healthbreakstress. That's upmchp.us/healthbreakstress.
Welcome back to Hear Me Out. I'm Celeste Headley.
Have you noticed how people are like forgetting fucking show etiquette at the moment? People are throwing shit on stage. Have you seen that? I fucking dare you. Dare you throw something at me and I'll fucking kill you.
You're listening to a recording of Adele, the singer-songwriter, addressing a recent audience about a disturbing new trend in concert going. A month ago, pop star Bebe Rexha took his cell phone to the face while she was performing and walked away with a black eye and 3 stitches.
As Rexha made her way down the stage, a concertgoer threw a cell phone from the audience, hitting her in the face. You can see in the video Rexha falling to her knees, crew members rushing in to help.
The man who threw that cell phone is being charged with misdemeanor threats and harassment. The rapper Cardi B was performing in Vegas when an audience member threw his drink at her. She responded by throwing her mic right back. And pop star Harry Styles, on the tail end of his world tour this summer, was routinely pelted with objects ranging from flowers to a handful of Skittles. The singer Pink was stunned when a fan threw a bag containing his deceased mother's ashes on stage.
This is your mom?
Incidents like this have become increasingly common this summer. You've probably seen many videos floating around on the internet, and maybe you've even seen it happen in person. Hopefully you haven't done it. But if you're not a concert person, you've probably seen someone texting while they're at a movie. Maybe you've seen them leaving a messy disaster at their seats or acting out and disturbing the peace somewhere else. And look, by no means are we coming here to tell you that this kind of behavior is appropriate or okay. It doesn't matter how common it is. Obviously, it is not appropriate. But how we got here and what we do going forward is up for debate. Sara Stewart is a freelance writer who recently had a piece in CNN titled, "We No Longer Know How to Behave in Public." She argues that we're past the point where we can try to make each other act better, and so it's time for the organizers of these events to step up. And Sara joins us now. Hi there.
Hi.
So, this show is sort of where we entertain a lot of quote-unquote unpopular opinions. Tell me what part of your opinion do you think might not go over well with others?
I have been writing about film for quite a long time. I was a full-time film critic for the New York Post for many years. And before that, I was writing other movie features. So I am somebody who has been going to a lot of movies for most of my adult life. So I have been steeped in this behavior probably more than your average moviegoer. And I have been saying for a long time that audience behavior has been sort of getting worse over the years. And I think that this became more of a slippery slope with social media, with cell phones, as everybody sort of normalized having their phone in their hand constantly. I think that there is a wide variety of whether people are bothered by this behavior or not. it's been my experience that I'm more on the sensitive end of really being distracted by people talking and people texting. So what's been really vindicating to see this summer is, although the incidents that I am writing about in CNN are pretty egregious, just to know that other people agree that something is not right here, that audiences really are behaving badly, and that it's not just me being a scold.
Okay, so the thing that I think maybe other people may not agree, or maybe I don't agree on, is that what the solution is. Because it sounds like you're saying the people who hold these events need to step forward, which sounds to me like making the argument for more security. Is that what you're saying?
It is. And I'll tell you why. I think that when you talk about audience behavior, particularly in the case of the movies, when you ask people to stop using their phones, I think that we have arrived at a moment where generally people just have accepted that everyone's phone is going to be on. My sense when I'm at the movies is that most people have realized that ship has sailed and that there is no go putting that genie back in the bottle. But I do think that there is inherently still a contract, a social contract that we have, whether it's at a live concert, whether it's at the movie, whether it's at a Broadway show, that we have agreed to be in a public space together to enjoy something that was written for us to consume. And so your right to have your phone light up or your right to talk to the person next to you ends where my line of sight or my hearing begins. I feel like that maybe is an inherently unpopular stance at this point, but I also think that there's still some truth in that. I think anyone who's a live performer would agree, particularly singers who've had things pelted at their faces this summer.
But, this is also a period of time when we're coming out of the pandemic when there were a lot of arguments, even over asking people to put masks on, right? Like, I remember the blowback when performers would tell audience members to put their masks over their nose, right? Patti LuPone scolded audience members for not having masks on or not having them on fully in the theater, and people called her some fairly rude names, which, if you're Patti LuPone, who cares what they call you? She's Patti frickin' LuPone. But, telling people they can't bring their phones anywhere or can't touch their phone is not going to go over well. Like, maybe that ship has kind of sailed, right?
Well, exactly. And most of us are Patti LuPone, unfortunately.
I would love to be Patti LuPone, but you're right. There is only one Patti LuPone.
The article that I previously wrote for CNN was actually about earlier this summer. There were a number of disturbing incidents where people were shot for doing really innocuous things. There was the teenager in Kansas who rang the man's doorbell. Then there was the woman who was killed turning around in someone's driveway. There was a cheerleader who tried to get in someone's car mistakenly and ended up getting shot. And my feeling was, for those of us who, to whatever degree of unpopularity, have sort of prided ourselves on calling out rude behavior, that ship has definitely sailed. And I no longer feel okay at all shushing my neighbors or asking them to put their phones away.
Yeah.
So the point that I made in this piece was that we really do, if in fact we are going to acknowledge that this contract exists, then the people who are asking us to pay money, in live concert cases, a lot of money to see these events, are entitled to some measure of the organizers of said event making perhaps an announcement beforehand saying, these are the things that we need you to do. We need you to put your phone away. We need you to not talk. In the case of concerts, we need you to not throw things at people. I can't believe that we have to say this. But also, I will say as a tangent, this is not new. This is just amped up. This has been happening for as long as movies and concerts have existed. And one of the great pictures I found when I was writing about this was a picture of the Beatles performing in 1960-something with a big lit up sign on the stage saying, "Please don't throw things."
Oh, yeah.
And apparently George Harrison had some jelly beans thrown at his face.
And at punk concerts, the Stooges, notably, they used to throw bottles of pee at them. But you're right, it has gotten way more widespread at this point. And they're throwing things at what would normally be considered nice concerts. Like, but okay. So there's a couple things that go on in my mind, and this is sort of what makes our conversation not just me interviewing you, but me disagreeing with you. And that's because I start to get a little hivey when we start talking about bringing in more security to police people's behavior, because there is always a disagreement among attendees of over what behavior. We're not talking about throwing things at performers. I mean, I think most people, except the people doing that ridiculous thing, would agree that you don't throw your mother's ashes at Pink. Like, that's, what are you, what is wrong with you? But when you talk about someone, say, screaming too loud or singing too loud or disrupting your concert experience, that's where people start trying to police others because they don't agree with the way they're enjoying the concert. And that's where sometimes it can become racialized. Sometimes it can become ageist. Sometimes it can become gender biased. And all these other biases that can come in, and then you bring security into it, and you can start throwing people out of concerts just because of people's biases and not because they're actually behaving badly.
I agree, actually. I have had at least one feedback email telling me that the reason this is happening is because certain groups of people are behaving badly.
Oh, God.
And while it wasn't overtly racial, it certainly was, that was the implication.
Yeah.
And that was definitely not my intention. But I do see where that could be problematic. And I do think in terms of phone use particularly, I think that different demographics have different standards. I mean, age particularly, as far as what's okay with phone usage. So yeah, maybe I am just a cranky old person who, doesn't like kids being on their phones. And I certainly would not argue that security guards should be roughing people up and throwing them out. I think there is, however, a middle ground. And I think that the pendulum has swung so far in favor of people having complete autonomy to kind of do this cyborg thing, basically, where your phone is permanently attached to your hand. You're recording what you're seeing. You're taking videos of the concert. You're taking videos of the movie, which is another thing people are doing this summer. They're taking, particularly with Barbie, they're taking videos of the movie. And I just think this is something that common sense would dictate is invasive and rude. And I think that perhaps, again, this is pretty idealistic, but I think that perhaps there's a conversation to be had about some common sense measures that might be able to fall in the middle without, as you said, sort of targeting certain groups and making it racialized or making it ageist.
I mean, it's hard, right, Sarah? I mean, it's difficult because, like, I remember, and my producer Maura Currie went with us. I bought when I was producing a show out of Atlanta. Is when the first Black Panther movie came out, and I bought my entire team tickets to go see Black Panther, and we went to a theater that was attended by mostly Black people, and that's where I feel comfortable. And if they're going to the Black Panther movie, they're going to be loud, and they're going to talk back to the screen, right? And that may be, to people who are not used to that might feel disruptive, right?
Well, that's true, but you have to pick and choose your movies because that sounds awesome.
It was awesome. It was awesome. Yes. And Maura is quite white. I feel comfortable saying that she's pretty white. And I think she would say it was awesome.
But then if you go to a showing of, say, a sort of a quiet period drama, say, or, a French movie, whatever, something with a little more, silence. I, again, think it's reasonable to expect for people to shut the F up. Although, again, this may just be me, but increasingly, I don't think that it is.
See, this is so difficult. It's really difficult when we start talking about behavior, and it's hard because we're moving from things which seem to me to be clearly over the line, like throwing things at a performer, and into things like disrupting other concert goers, which are in a more of a gray area. We have to take a break here, so I'll do that, and then we'll come back and talk a little bit more about what lives inside those gray areas. We're talking about how to make people, or who is responsible for making people behave themselves at public events like concerts and movies. And I'm talking to Sara Stewart, a freelance writer who writes about culture. This is Hear Me Out, a podcast from Slate. I'm Celeste Headlee. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
What does it mean to be Black in America? In NPR's Black Stories, Black Truths, a collection of stories as varied, nuanced, and dynamic as Black experiences, you'll hear it means everything. Search NPR Black Stories, Black Truths wherever you get your podcasts.
I wanted to say a quick hello to our listeners on Stitcher. As you may have heard, the Stitcher app is ceasing operations on August 29th, but fear not, you will still be able to find us. Listen and subscribe to Hear Me Out on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, or anywhere else you find podcasts. And thanks so much for being a loyal listener. And we're back. This is Hear Me Out. I'm Celeste Headlee, and today we're talking to Sara Stewart. And if you have been to a concert and seen something get thrown on stage and been horrified, or if you've been to a movie where someone answered a phone call and wondered why, then you are probably pretty into this conversation, because Sara Stewart thinks not only is that absolutely unacceptable, but she feels the movie owner, the person who owns the movie theater, needs to do something about that, or the person who organizes the concert, the arena owners, need to step up and make sure that the kind of behavior which is really disruptive does not happen. And Sara, I want to make sure I'm actually describing your opinion clearly, because we started off by talking about the stuff that makes headlines, the things that are thrown at BB Rexa, giving her stitches, the things that are thrown at Cardi B. Somebody threw a drink at her and she threw her mic back. So we started out there, and now we're talking about people taking pictures at Barbie. So let's talk about that gray area. Where do you think the sort of the absolute red flags end and the yellow flags begin?
Well, I think, or rather I hope, that all of us might be able to move forward and coexist and enjoy entertainment the way we want to enjoy it. And one of the suggestions that I have made is to essentially create, for movies, create certain screenings where you would put your phone away, or perhaps you would have your phone, you would sign your phone away to a security guard or something, which would enable people like me who, the stodgy, old timers who don't want to look at our phones during movies, which would enable us to actually enjoy a movie in quiet and darkness, the way I would argue it was intended to be watched. And then the rest of the screenings would be, everybody would be perfectly free to have their phones out and do whatever they do. I think that most people are probably okay with seeing a few screens light up here and there in the movies. I have accepted that. I really do think that is the new reality that we're living in. But I also think that there ought to be room for people who want to have more of a single focus on what it is they want to see or hear or experience.
So, I remember there are concerts in which they make people put them in those bags or those containers that prevents them from getting a signal. I had to put my phone in that when I was at Prince's last concert in Atlanta, and they had to put them. You had to put your cell phones in there because he doesn't want them interrupting his music. Totally understandable. Would that be a solution for you?
Absolutely. And I think if Prince said it, it's right. That's a hard line for me.
Right. I mean, that's probably a good way to live, right? It's
a Patty LuPone.
Right. Absolutely. If you're living by the advice of Prince and Patti LuPone, you're probably okay. All right. So that would be something that an organizer could do, is require that people put their cell phones into those things so that they can't get a phone call. And of course, the pushback is always, what if it's an emergency call? And what's your response to that?
Absolutely. And also, as another letter writer pointed out to me, there are people with disabilities who will need their phone to check their phones for certain things. There was someone who said, I go to the movies and I have to check my phone multiple times during the hour, and taking that away from me would be a violation of the ADA. So yeah, that's tough. I genuinely don't know what to say, although I do think that there are certain exceptions that could be made for certain valid cases like that without having every single person's phone out all the time. Again, this is all very pie in the sky still, but I do think those bags are pretty useful potentially. You know, we used to have concerts way back in the olden days at big stadiums where we just would go without phones because phones didn't exist, and we all managed to get through somehow.
Yeah, and I still go to concerts where you don't hear cell phones going off. And I will tell you right now, if you go like to the opera and a cell phone goes off, the entire audience will glare you into absolute puddle of shame. So, okay, let me put to you some other things that I consider to be incredibly rude that other people may not. For example, I am a performer, right? I'm a professional opera singer. I find it unbelievably rude when people stand up as soon as a curtain comes down and start to exit before the curtain calls begin. They start to head towards the door because they want to beat the crowd to get out of the parking structure, right? So that as you are coming out on stage to take your bow, you're seeing people's backs as they're leaving. I find that incredibly rude. Your take?
I couldn't agree more.
Really?
And I think that it's just another example of this sort of solipsism that pervades everything we do when we're out in public together, where the individual's needs are always paramount, and considering what's going on with everyone around you is like a distant afterthought. And again, I know I sound so old for saying this, but I also think, like, how common sense is that? If we could all just be a little more thoughtful about the people around us or the people on the stage. I don't understand what's so hard about that. But again, I know that it is.
Okay, so we found an area of agreement here. I mean, I think that the main, I don't even know if it's disagreement. I guess for me, it's just discomfort when I start to think about policing behavior. Well,
it's just the word police.
Yes,
too.
Exactly. And because I just, and we hear tone policing, and I hear someone in my head saying, don't take that tone with me. And I know that there are people out there who are constantly trying to put people in their place by telling them that they are not acting right, and that's what makes me a little bit nervous.
I would also suggest that what has really lit a fire under a lot of public rudeness, in my opinion, is what's happened since Trump was elected. Since a sort of a flagrant me first attitude was kind of co-signed by the leader of the country, I see a lot of the worst behavior coming from the sort of red baseball cap crowd. And, these are the same people who are generating a lot of what you're talking about, a lot of the tone policing and a lot of putting down of marginalized groups. And I really think that a lot of the worst behavior is coming from that direction.
Okay. So this is difficult because, I don't know if having more security at a concert helps that. You know what I mean? Because the people, say that I'm at a concert, right? And let's say that somebody next to me keeps opening their phone to check their email or whatever they're doing. I don't want to look at their phone. I don't want to see their personal texts or whatever it is. I'm not going to call the security over to tell on them. I'm just going to get irritated. But somebody else who is maybe biased, maybe doesn't appreciate whatever young person, or they think this 19-year-old is dressed, doesn't have enough clothing on, or whatever. They're judging this person. they may be really ready to call security over on this other person, and they may be very quick to police this other person's behavior, and that may end up being overused by some and underused by others.
And it's a situation where it could escalate quickly, and violence could ensue.
Right.
In the enforcing of whatever rule it was that was being reported.
I mean, I feel like the laws of unintended consequences will very quickly come into play here.
It's that is a real consideration. It's true. I wonder if, does it come down to choosing an absolute freedom for all to behave however they like, and this sort of police state, which, the way you're describing it sounds vaguely terrifying, and what's not really what I was intending. I, again, have to push back and say, I really think there's a middle ground. And I think that when we say that there isn't, I feel like there is a certain disingenuousness to that from sort of a public reaction. I think that we all know bad behavior when we see it. I really do.
Okay, I don't know about that. But we'll dig into that a little bit. We need to take another break. Sara Stewart is with me. We are talking about bad behavior at public events. This is Hear Me Out. I'm Celeste Headley, and we will be right back.
Sometimes things in the world of technology are complicated and need careful explaining. Sometimes they just need a little hard truth.
I don't think anyone is going to buy a banana with crypto at any point in the foreseeable future.
I'm Lizzie O'Leary, the host of Slate's What Next TBD, your clear-eyed guide to technology, power, and the future. Friday and Sunday, wherever you get your podcasts.
Hi, you guys. Are you thinking about the same things I am? Like, are you trying to figure out the right way to make fun of Casey DeSantis? Are you similarly concerned about this scourge of bad men from Toronto? Tory Lanez, Tristan Thompson, and Drake, of course, Drake. Are you also worried about the erosion of abortion rights, the restrictions put on gender-affirming care, and what it means if Kyle Richards is actually a lesbian? Great. Me too. Now we can do this together. I'm Sachi Cole. You might know me from the podcast Scamfluencers, or my work at BuzzFeed, or This American Life, or Netflix. But I'm in your eardrums right now to tell you that I'm hosting The Waves from Slate Podcasts for the next few weeks. Every episode, I'll be joined by a new guest to unpack the latest terrors in gender, feminism, and the pursuit of an even marginally better world. Tune into The Waves wherever you get your podcasts. I'll be there all August.
Good to have you back. This is Hear Me Out, a podcast from Slate. I'm Celeste Headley, and with me is Sara Stewart. And we have kind of come to the crux of the disagreement here, because just before the break, Sara Stewart said, I think we know all bad behavior when we see it. And here's, I think, maybe the crux of our disagreement, Sara, because I don't agree. I think maybe there's a lot of people who are willing to give themselves the benefit of the doubt and very, very quick to label other people's behavior as bad in a heartbeat, and do not recognize their own bad behavior even when they see it on video. So, one of the things I found interesting about some of these throwing bottles things is that psychologists say that a big reason this is spreading is because of the main character syndrome, right?
Yeah, that's right.
That everybody wants to they want to go viral, right? And it never even occurs to them that this drive to have all eyes on them means that all eyes are going to see them and be hating them and thinking they're horrible. They just want the attention, right? I think people struggle to see themselves. When they're thinking themselves as the main character, they're not thinking of themselves as the villain, right?
I think you're right. I do think you're right. And I think that a corollary of that behavior that I thought was really interesting is this idea of parasocial relationships, that people are trying to sort of have this connection with artists they love, however extreme, by throwing things at them, which is something that Billie Eilish, for example, has said has been happening for years, and she said something to the effect of, I get it, but please stop doing it. And I think that, again, I don't want to demean anyone's social media status, but I do think that there's a certain way in which people are enthralled to constantly producing content, constantly trying to go viral, constantly trying to keep up with the conversation that is really impeding their ability to just enjoy being in the moment. And it sounds so severe to push back and say, you need to put that down and just focus on what's going on. But I also think that's that's an age-old argument. That is something people have been saying since the invention of any technology, that people have always been too distracted, that when it comes down to it, what you want to do is kind of train your mind to be able to focus on one thing because it's healthier and it will make you happier. So is that too prescriptive? Maybe. But I do think that it's worth having the conversation. I do think it's worth examining what it's doing to our collective psychology to be so married to this idea that we have to be always on, even when we're somewhere where we should have the freedom to turn off and really throw ourselves into someone else's art.
I mean, it's, if there were a restriction on having phones at these events, that would take away that drive to go viral, right? Because they wouldn't be filming themselves.
Absolutely.
On the other hand, I don't think that would ever happen because a huge part of going to these concerts is filming yourselves and taking pictures at the concerts.
And we've seen that with the Taylor Swift Eras tour particularly. And I would be lying if I didn't say I have watched a few of those clips of Taylor performing. Like, it's
diving
great.
into the stage.
Yeah. Wasn't able to get a ticket myself, and I have really enjoyed seeing other people there. So I get it. And in a way, it's been fun that those videos exist. But on the other hand, if you told me Taylor, like Prince, had demanded that everybody surrender their phones on the way in, I would have said, right on.
I mean, I think it's possible that the performers could make a larger moat around the stage. That could be one way that they end up protecting themselves. That would make perfect sense to me. It's also possible that these venues that accommodate tens of thousands of people, also in the era of mass shootings, maybe there's also a question of safety in these venues that accommodate major crowds. I mean, I don't want to bring all this down, but I'm just saying intimate, there's a beauty to intimate events where you can see people's faces, where there's a more human level to them. Maybe, and I don't want to be the more old-fashioned person here, but maybe there's not just an economy of scale, but a humanity of scale.
I think that's true. And we've seen over, I don't know, the past decade, the consideration of mass shooters has really infiltrated how people are at these big events, or even at the movies. The house lights don't go down all the way a lot of the time anymore. Yeah. I think for security reasons. And so it isn't possible to enjoy a movie in total darkness the way you used to, just because that's not the world we live in anymore. And perhaps we do have to just accept that enjoying a movie without phones and people talking around you is also just not the way we enjoy something anymore. But I will push back against that for as long as I can, because I think that good art is worth putting your phone down for and shutting up for. I think that you really, my article, I think I said, like, it's relaxing not to be the main character, Like, you don't have to do that all the time. You can turn it off. Let somebody else be the main character.
I mean, I agree with that. I mean, I got to say, Sarah, I agree with that 100%. It's not that part that I found myself disagreeing with. I just feel like it's not realistic. I mean, I just don't see it happening. Like, I myself love to leave my phone places and leave the house without my phone. Love it. I used to pretend that I'd forgotten my phone at work all the time so that people couldn't call me, right? I just don't think it's realistic. I just don't think you're ever going to tell people they can't touch their phones.
I think you're right. I mean, ultimately, I think you're right. I enjoyed making the argument for all of these amendments, but I mean, quite honestly, this is why I'm not a film critic anymore. I have stopped going to movies largely because I just can't. I can't take it. I would rather write about other things. It just became, it was like every movie I went to, hope sprang eternal that I would actually be able to focus on the movie. And increasingly, it was never that way. And that is a really sad thing to admit as somebody who loves movies as much as I do. I think that for some of us who feel strongly about the way movies should be consumed, we have just had to accept that we're going to watch them at home largely and leave the movie theaters to people who want to multitask.
I mean, so we don't fully agree on solutions here. Can I posit you one thing that came to me and see if there's any common ground?
Absolutely.
So the one thing that is super powerful for our species is social sanctioning on like a one-to-one level. And almost everybody goes to these concerts with someone else. That may not be true always of movies, but certainly concerts, it's very rare that people go alone. So if everybody who goes to a concert with somebody else makes the pact to have a conversation about what is and is not acceptable and how they will be mortified if the other person does A, B, C, D, or E at that concert. I will never forgive you if you throw your mother's ashes at Pink. Maybe some social sanctioning might work a little better than saying you're not allowed to touch your phone. I mean, maybe if we start, yeah, you do.
I really do. I think it's a great idea. I think it's along the same lines as, I am a political phone banker. And one of the things they have us say often is, okay, well now, at the end of your call, you ask people to ask 5 friends how they plan to vote, sort of spreading the word in this very organic way. And it feels kind of silly to say it, but it apparently works. It works really well. And I think maybe, there could be some potential for something similar in this vein. Again, I don't know, on a large scale if that would really affect change, but it certainly can't get worse than it is.
Yeah, I mean, I just feel like if not throwing stuff at people is the quiet part, maybe we do have to start saying the quiet part out loud to each other and just say to the person with us in the car, okay, nobody in here had better throw anything at anybody else. I don't know. I just feel like it might be more realistic.
Isn't it incredible that we have to say that, though? Truly, where have we arrived that we have to have that conversation?
Right? Except think about all the things we now have to say in the 21st century, Sarah. Think of all the things that have to be said.
It's true.
I won't list them, but just think.
I also think, if I may, ultimately, I don't really think that this should be down to personal responsibility.
Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah.
I think that there's a nihilism in our culture right now. We are going through a summer of extreme heat, of wildfire smoke, just choking our cities. We've had things that happen to us over the past few years that have all made us kind of bonkers. And I don't really blame anybody for acting out in whatever ways to make them feel a little bit better about being in public.
So clearly I had a lot of thoughts about this, and they weren't entirely perfectly formed. Maybe you have more clearly articulated thoughts than I did. I just basically had icky feelings about the idea of calling insecurity. But if you have thoughts on how to get people to behave better at public events, I want to hear them. What suggestions do you have? Have you had this conversation with your friends? Let me know how that went. You can email us. It's hearmeout@slate.com. We love hearing from you, especially if you have good ideas on how to have uncomfortable conversations about other people's bad behavior. And there's another way you can chime in too. Take a minute, if you have not already, to give us a rating and review wherever you're listening. We read your reviews and we care what you think. Your ratings and reviews help us find more listeners, so really, we appreciate it. Hear Me Out is a podcast from Slate. The show is produced by the wonderful Maura Currie. Ben Richmond is our great senior director of podcast operations, and Alicia Montgomery is the fantastic VP of Slate Audio. I'm your host, Celeste Headley. Until next time, speak your mind, but keep it open.
Hi, you guys. Are you thinking about the same things I am? Like, are you trying to figure out the right way to make fun of Casey DeSantis? Are you similarly concerned about this scourge of bad men from Toronto? Tory Lanez, Tristan Thompson, and Drake, of course, Drake. Are you also worried about the erosion of abortion rights, the restrictions put on gender-affirming care, and what it means if Kyle Richards is actually a lesbian? Great. Me too. Now we can do this together. I'm Sachi Cole. You might know me from the podcast Scamfluencers, or my work at BuzzFeed, or This American Life, or Netflix. But I'm in your eardrums right now to tell you that I'm hosting The Waves from Slate Podcasts for the next few weeks. Every episode, I'll be joined by a new guest to unpack the latest terrors in gender, feminism, and the pursuit of an even marginally better world. Tune into The Waves wherever you get your podcasts. I'll be there all August.